Welcome back to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and Grok Media LLC. My guest again this week, we'll tell you that story in a second, is Kimberly Morin from the Women's Defense League. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good. So earlier today we recorded this interview and I had a technical issue and it was unplayable. So we're back. Hopefully it'll still feel fresh. Even though we've already gone through all of these things. But the Women's Defense League is having an event this coming Saturday. And why don't you tell us about it?
Awesome. So this Saturday, April 12th, from noon to 2 p.m. at the State House Plaza is going to be our 10th annual Second Amendment rally. It's called 2A Freedom Rally 2025. You can see information about it on our website. We're going to have speakers, women speakers from the legislature, including reps and a senator. And we're going to have raffles, clicky bangy type things for raffles. And it's a great way to show the legislature that you will not put up with gun control and you will stand for your Second Amendment rights. And you're with hundreds of people, hopefully, who have the same mindset that our Second Amendment rights are critical and they are not to be infringed upon.
And you guys did some good work this year battling bad bills in the legislature. Why don't we talk about a couple of those?
There was actually a couple of bills. One of them was to stop people from carrying firearms to a polling place. Now, there's no reason for this. The sponsor of the bill, Timothy Horrigan, even admitted that there's no issue, there's no problem that this bill is trying to solve. Of course there isn't. Democrats never try to solve actual problems. But that meant that, if you were an abused woman or you had a stalker or you were a man who, had to be careful, you weren't allowed to protect yourself. And if you refused to give up your Second Amendment rights, you could give up your voting right of voting in person and do an absentee ballot. So he was trying to infringe upon two different rights with one bill. It was easily shot down, pun intended. There was another one that combined two gun control bills into one. It was a mandatory waiting period and what was the other? Background checks, which meant, and that was David Misogynous who did that one. No friend to the Second Amendment or women. So that was a waiting period. So you'd have to wait, even though you're legally able to purchase and possess a firearm. Once you got approval from NICS, the FBI, ATF, you would not be able to pick up your firearm for 3 days. It actually makes no sense to delay someone's rights, especially their fundamental right to self-defense. And the background check really is trying to infringe upon private sales, which there aren't that many, and training. The big thing was the training. You wouldn't be able to hand a firearm to another person to train, in our case, women, if you didn't conduct a background check first, if you didn't know if they were a prohibited person. Now, we have people at the Women's Defense League, we have women signed, yes, I am, able to purchase, possess firearm, whatever. But if we were to try to go to get background checks for all these women the day of a training class, it would take hours and the class wouldn't start till God knows what time. It wasn't possible. For most organizations and most instructors in the state, it's not possible. For SIG, who has their own gun shop there, yeah, sure, you can do it. It's still going to take time and cost a lot more money. So it was prohibitive for gun safety training. That one also was shot down. That was an old Catherine Rogers one. It keeps getting raised from the depths of hell where she is now.
If you don't know who she is, search Catherine Rogers on GraniteGrok.com and you'll get a whole bunch of neat details about her. So, yeah, the funny thing about the polling place bill, it comes up every year. And like you say, the same bills come up year after year. If you do a little research, you don't have to. We're going to tell you there has never been a firearm incident at a polling place in the entire history of the state of New Hampshire.
Nope.
So Mr. Horrigan, we call him Timmy, wanted just to, it's just the goal is to make it inconvenient to carry in as many places as possible so that it becomes impossible to carry.
Right.
And, it's a constitutional carry state. And, private businesses are, of course, welcome to decide if they want to be gun-free zones, and people who carry concealed are free to decide whether or not to ignore that in the name of their own safety. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I carry just about everywhere. I'm
Right.
legally allowed to.
Right.
Wasn't there a like a pseudo-ish red flag type mental health bill this year?
That was the gun confiscation bill that was put forward
Okay.
by former law enforcement Republican.
Oh,
This
great.
was
Oh, that's
the
right.
bill.
Yes.
Yes. This was the bill. A former officer, Bradley Haas, was murdered at the state mental health facility. He was unarmed because their security guards were all unarmed. And he was murdered by basically someone who was violently mentally ill. However, that person was actually never convicted of a crime for being violently mentally ill, as far as I know. So they wanted to disarm people for getting involuntarily committed to a mental institution. And if you've seen any of the psychiatrists that work for the state, those are the people that should probably be in there. They are nuts. And they hate our Second Amendment rights. Hate them. They push for gun control and they don't know what they're talking about. So the bill it saw all kinds of different, it was like they tried to change it and shift it. It became worse as it went on. At first, it was only applied to people who were violently, mentally ill, committed a crime, right? Actually committed a crime. Then they changed it to anyone who was involuntarily committed. So if you were a mother who lost your child, or a wife who lost his husband of 50 years, and you were just inconsolable, you didn't want to hurt yourself, you didn't want to hurt anyone else, they just put you, had you seek help for like a week or 10 days or whatever, you would lose your rights. And then have to spend thousands of dollars for a lawyer to get them back. It's a terrible bill. All it is gun confiscation. It does nothing to solve the real problem of violently mentally ill people. What we really should be doing is opening more mental institutions in this state. And I would gladly have my taxpayers go to them so that people who are violently mentally ill and cannot be safe in society for themselves or others have a safe place to live. And they can live a safe and happy life, as opposed to outside in society where they really can't. Because the same psychiatrists who hate our Second Amendment rights are the ones who said, let's close down all the mental health institutions. These people can just take psychotropic, untested drugs and live amongst society. It was a lie.
It didn't work. It's
And it
very
was too
much
late.
like the problem with mainstreaming troubled students in classrooms so that nobody else could learn anything. All these Democrat plans kind of work that way. Yeah, and I mean, the mental health culture in New Hampshire is not great as it is, but I mean, if they were to take a serious look at it, I imagine they could do a bit better of a job than they're doing now. All right, so so you've got your event coming up. That's Saturday from 12 to 2 at
That's right.
Concord at the State House, and lots of people will be there, and they're going to raffle off a bunch of firearms and some other stuff.
Fun things.
Things that go with firearms. And you do training. What other classes and events have you got coming up?
So we have a new shooter shoot, which is what we call it. And it's a half-day class. So it teaches the fundamentals about shooting, shows women how to load and unload with snap caps, which are fake cartridges for those out there who don't know. And then we bring them on the range and have them actually shoot firearms. 22 caliber. We always start off women with 22 caliber. What's really unique about our organization is we are women-only training and we are women-only range staff. So there is only women instructors and range safety officers. We were probably the first in New Hampshire to do that, and we're one of the few who actually continue to do that and have been doing it since 2014. So it's a different environment when it's women only and you have women instructors, just because we understand a little bit. I'm not going to say better, but we just understand the needs of women. Because we are women. We all started from the beginning. We all started in a class whenever, some of our instructors have been shooting forever. Me, I didn't start shooting until I moved to New Hampshire, which is one of the reasons I fled to New Hampshire. So, it's just a great environment. We have that. We have a Refuse to be a Victim class coming up on May 3rd, which is situational awareness, teaching women how to make themselves safer when they're traveling, when they're in public, when they're in their homes, using layers of security, and make sure you're not a victim, because criminals will not try to victimize someone who they think will cause a problem.
That's true. So, yeah. You got to be in your mind if you start stirring up trouble with Kimberly Morin. So, about how many women a year do you think you guys manage to run through your classes and so on and so forth?
It's usually hundreds. It depends on how many classes we have. We have young girls that come through as well. We have trained little girls as young as 6. Like their parents, they were on the range with us during a family picnic, up to 80 something. So it's a range of ages, of women from all backgrounds, from all walks of life. They come from Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Mass. They're not just from New Hampshire. We really have a variety of women that we train, and it's fantastic. It really is.
That sounds great. Anything else? How do they reach out? How do they get a hold of you or support your organization?
You can find our website at wdlnh.org. You can find info about the rally at wdlnh.org/rally. And there's a link in there for the fun raffles. You can email us at info@wdlnh.org if you have any questions at all. I've actually had a few questions from different women today, and it takes 2 seconds to explain something, and it's awesome.
When I took my beginning pistol class many, many, many years ago, it was a good mix of folks. Everybody was there to learn how to use a firearm safely before they began to own or carry one. And, it should be voluntary. Some states require whatever it is they call for training, and it's usually very expensive because once you require something, people milk that cow as hard as they can because it's an opportunity to make money. It's like vehicle inspections in New Hampshire.
We actually charge less than most instructors because we want as many women as possible to learn. Our whole organization is volunteer, including our instructors. So if an instructor is 12 hours at the range teaching women, that's on her own time. We charge a little bit less money just to cover the cost of, ammunition, different things that apply to the classes. So we really try to make it as inexpensive as possible, because you're right, some of those classes can be really expensive.
I paid more than $25 for mine, and that was a while ago. I can't even remember how far back it was. But in today's dollars, it would be a lot more. Anyway, now you also have you're all volunteer. You also have volunteers who take days off to go speak for bills, to lobby as much as a citizen can, legislators and stuff like that. Yes?
Yes, we are in the legislature testifying against gun control bills every year. We were there multiple days this year. We had to go in the Senate. We had to go in the House. We track bills. We inform people. We give the information on our website. You can see our blogs for all the gun control bills that were up this year. We let people know when they can take action, come to the hearings, send emails, sign in to the hearing, because we can do that online now. Call your reps, email your reps. So we provide all the easy activism for people to get involved. That's why we want to provide a little bit more difficult activism of showing up at the rally this weekend, because when you have people protesting all over the country, but they're not really protesting anything, we're rallying to show legislators that we will continue to fight for our Second Amendment rights and against gun control. So that's why this is important. We shouldn't have to do this every year, and we wouldn't if they would stop pushing gun control every single year.
Yeah, but they're not going to stop, are they?
So here we are. So will we.
There you go. And I will be there if that helps. Anybody wants to come see me, I would like you to come see Kimberly and sign up for the raffle and support the Women's Defense League of New Hampshire. Kimberly, thank you very much for coming back and doing this again.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
All right. You have a great day.
You too.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. We're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it, and we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you'll make time to check out all of our podcasts brought to you by Grok Media LLC and GraniteRock.com. Mondays at 8 p.m., it's Right Side Up. On Tuesdays, it's our live show from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Granite State Live. Wednesdays, tune in at 8 o'clock for Justice for All. Thursdays, 8 p.m., it's Grok Talk. Friday at 8 p.m., it's Manch Talk. Saturday, again at 8 p.m., The New England Take. And Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, it's Vermont Daily Chronicle Television. We are your source for local podcasts, news, politics, and opinion, brought to you by Grok Media LLC and GraniteRock.com.
Grok Talk.
Welcome back to Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteRock.com and Grok Media LLC. I'm here with my second guest this week, Mike Rogers. You'll be familiar with him. He's been writing for Granite Rock for as long as I have, about 15 years, and he's had plenty to say. And we were having a little conversation offline about trade and tariffs and taxes and VAT and a bunch of other stuff. And I was like, hey, let's connect and have a conversation with Mike about that sort of stuff. So, Mike, I'm just going to set you loose. Let's talk about trade and tariffs and taxes and see where we go.
Sure. So, this is a very ambitious move that Trump's making, because if you look at what he's doing, aside from the fact he seems to be firing in all directions at once, it's not aimless. He's trying to reset the country to its founding. And that's a lot of stuff, like less government, less people, less taxes. How do you get to less taxes apart from having a lot less people in the government? Well, you also fund the government the way it was supposed to be funded, which is tariffs. That is to say, you tax the stuff that comes into the country and use that money to fund the federal government. And maybe if you make it small enough, like defense, diplomacy, and commerce, not much else, that you might actually get there. So if you look at the world order as it's been since the Second World War, and especially since Bretton Woods, when America had the most powerful economy, when we manufactured everything, when we weren't embarrassed to drill oil and mine coal and start nukes, we had lots of energy, lots of production, lots of money, and a lot of exports. But, there'd been a war, and some of the people who'd come through that war, some of the countries, were in poor shape, and we did things to put them back on their feet. Because after the First World War, the big mistake was that the Allied powers demanded that Germany pay reparations, punitive reparations that ruined the economy, and they tried to pay with inflated currency, and that led to their currency collapse and political turmoil, and lo and behold, we got Hitler in World War II. So that's not a good thing. So America went into the new world after World War II and said, okay, we can afford to be generous, magnanimous, and we essentially invested in places like Germany and Japan, and we set low tariffs or none, so that the world's goods could flow into the United States, and all was good for a while. And somewhere around the 70s, we began to get a little perhaps too generous, and we started to shift manufacturing offshore, buy from places that were just coming out of their own problems such as China. And we thought, I think probably from the time of Nixon, but especially from the time of Clinton, that you could turn China capitalist if you just made friends and bought their stuff. Well, that didn't work out so well. So in parallel with attempting to reset the government to be funded at least partially by tariffs, we're looking at the trade imbalances and saying, you know, these countries have got anything from a few percent to 50 or 80, 200% on selected goods, tariffs on anything we produce. And they have other barriers. Our agriculture doesn't pass muster in most of Europe and in Japan and in certain other parts of Asia. Our cars don't pass whatever technical tests they choose to apply to them. And so we sell virtually nothing, but we generously buy from them. So they build factories and we stop using ours. And after a while, the middle class here starts to fall apart, and sooner or later the currency fails because we're essentially sending money overseas and we're not getting a balanced trade. The free traders have this wonderful view that if you just let everybody buy and sell anything they want and manufacture what they're best at, Ricardo, I think, called it comparative advantage, that the world will settle and everybody will get the best stuff at the cheapest prices. Well, that only works if everybody plays by the same rules. But the EU doesn't, China doesn't, and Canada and Mexico doesn't, even if they're in the NAFTA or USMCA or whatever else you call it. So when you look at that and you look at what we're trying to do to change the government funding model and reduce or eliminate income taxes, eliminates a bit of a pipe dream, you have to apply tariffs to incoming goods to balance the costs and the demand. And so I think Trump has a vision of a low, even tariff everywhere. But there are a lot of places that charge us way more than, say, the 10% he's got in mind. China, in any case, charge up to 80% on some of our products that they were importing. Europe charges maybe a few percent in tariffs, but another 21% in value-added tax. Canada charges tariffs, which are higher on some products than others, and an 11% average value-added tax across the country. It varies from place to place because there's two components to it, federal and local. And Mexico has an average 16% value-added tax. That is an evil thing. It's designed to capture the value added at every stage of production from, for example, mining to smelting to manufacturing to transporting and finally selling to the customer. It's bad because most countries that introduced it already had an income tax and not a cheap one. Oh, this will reduce the income tax. Oh, no, it didn't. It kept growing and growing and growing. I remember when value-added tax was around 5% in Europe. 21 is the average now. But here's the real kicker, why it's more like a tariff than just a tax. If you export from the country, all the value added at all of those steps and the taxes that may have been collected are rebated when it leaves the country. So, you tax the iron ore, you tax the steel smelting, you tax the metal panels, you tax the engine, and you put the car together and you export it to America and you get it all back from the government. So a value-added tax is not applied to cars leaving Germany, for example. But guess what? Whatever tariffs they have, they also add 0 to 21 in one jump, 21% value-added tax if our cars sell in Germany. And so it's not as simple as it looks. So I have a rough rule of thumb here. I don't know whether this is how it'll settle out. I do think Trump's trying to negotiate the majority of countries down to a low, even tariff, which he'll then match. But if you look at the total cost of getting our products into some of these countries, I think we should be looking at much higher tariffs, not like 100% or anything, but so Canada's got a value-added tax. We should charge them maybe 15% because our average sales tax is about 6% nationwide. Some don't pay it. Lucky New Hampshire, some do. Mexico has a 16% value-added tax. Well, that's 10% higher than ours, than our sales taxes. And Europe has 21% average value-added tax. That's 15% higher than ours. So why shouldn't we tariff Canada at 15% and Mexico at 20% and Europe at 25%? And the rest of the world, if they're not applying punitive tariffs to our products, at 10%. And I think all these countries that are calling the White House right now are looking to get to a low, even tariff. I mean, look, Vietnam makes great cloth. Well, so what if they charge 80% tariffs on everything from America? There are places that make stuff that it would be useful for us to buy. There are also places where if they make it and we don't, not only do we not have a local source of supply in a conflict, but we're also shoveling money out the door. We should be producing as many high-value products as we can. We should be tariffing things like rare earth minerals, for example. China isn't the only place they come from, but they've cornered the market with slave labor. We could get all the stuff we need to build our iPhones and military gadgets here, and Greenland, and Ukraine, and probably Canada too, because you've probably seen the TV ads about Canada and Ontario and what good partners they are and how they've got everything we need. Don't tariff us, bro. You saw those, right, Steve?
Yeah, I'm familiar. Here, I had a question. So obviously, the trade imbalance is a big deal. A lot of people have gotten hung up on just the math of the tariffs. But I was reading Jeff Childers this morning, and he was talking about that. And he was talking about all the other things that the president is doing, and he's using tariffs to do it. So he writes, no U.S. president has ever simultaneously negotiated with the entire planet over everything, not just trade, but security guarantees, foreign aid, market access, immigration enforcement, energy deals, pharmaceutical policy, and so on, and done it openly using tariffs as the primary pressure mechanism rather than through military force, strings on IMF loans, CIA black ops, soft power, or covert destabilization. So basically what he's saying is that, and this is very true because the president has said as much, he's not just using tariffs to equal trade and make a balanced trade. Trade balance is the goal, but there's a lot of other things in there that he's trying to get done with all these foreign nations simultaneously through tariffs, which I just think is fascinating, and it's just so over the top. Nobody's ever done it, and he's doing it himself.
Well, he's basically he's using it like a fine, and that's the other reason why he was trying to slap tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Both of those are gateways for the world's ne'er-do-wells to get into the United States. And we've done a lot to seal the southern border, but the Canadian border is long and hard to police, and the Canadians weren't particularly interested in policing it. And they let fentanyl through, as well as illegal aliens and military-age Chinese and Asian men.
Yeah, and he's using it for military cost sharing, tech regulation, currency manipulation issues. And the beauty of it is thanks to the previous administration, he has complete control. He doesn't need to go to Congress for this. He doesn't need a bureaucracy to do this. And it's been made very clear by both the president and the Treasury Secretary that everything goes to Mr. Trump, and Mr. Trump decides if he likes the deal. So he can just flick a switch and fix problems on a country by country basis. And he can make it very clear to the negotiators what it is he's looking for, and where they end up is someplace where he wants to be. And until they get there, it's not going to happen. So I just, a lot of people were pissed off. And of course, the stock market went down, but then it had this massive epic rise today. And it'll probably keep doing the roller coaster thing. That's what the market does.
Got up to 40,000, it went down by a few thousand. And there's a wonderful meme out there of the stock market graph showing the Biden years and the recent changes. And somewhere at the top on the right, i.e. now, there's a peak and it drops off a bit. And in the middle, there's this massive sagging hole where the market went nowhere and dropped off rather during the middle of the Biden administration with the inflation. But they don't talk about that, and the graph is marked up. Don't panic. Panic!
Well, do you remember the graph I made about gasoline prices? We had this, how they go up and down a lot, and it had like 20 years of gas prices, and I took little babies' heads, and one was a happy baby head, and one was a crying baby head. And so whenever gas prices were high, the Democrat baby heads were happy, and whenever gas prices were low, they were crying, because that's what they wanted. They wanted expensive, economy killing energy prices. And people just have to understand that's the way this works. They don't care about tariffs. They don't. They've talked about using them. They have every interest in the world, if it was to their advantage, to apply them. It's all political. They don't care about the middle class. The middle class has wasted away for decades, and that's exactly what they wanted. And now that somebody's come along and tried something historically different to try and change that game. In fact, I actually have, let's see if I have it up here. Let me look.
It's what they call a feature, not a bug. It's a feature of socialism as you head towards communism, that the middle class is hollowed out. At the upper end, they manage to be the apparatchiks and the ones that hang on to the regime's coattails and get rich, and the rest of the middle merges with the poor and begs the government for scraps. And that's the way the Democrats want it. They want you on the plantation, and there's a couple of different varieties of Democrats. The ones that milk the fact that the white guys had them on the plantation once upon a time, and the ones that bemoan the fact that their supply of free Hispanics is going to go away, like Jasmine Crockett. Who's going to pick Mike?
Of course, there's a lot of changes coming, but here, as I was about to say, from the White House is a statement sent out in a press release email from President Trump. It's on his motivations. It says, "I'm proud to be the president for the workers, not the outsourcers, the president who stands up for Main Street, not Wall Street, who protects the middle class, not the political class, and who defends America, not trade cheaters all over the globe. Our opponents are not afraid that our America First policies will fail. They're terrified that our strategy will succeed, and we're going to get bigger and stronger and better, and that is what's happening. We're going to prove that all of their treasonous years of betrayal will not be forgotten." This is a Republican president. It's just so cool to see somebody stand up and not just talk about helping people who work for a living, but saying, that's good for America.
It is. And by the way, the energy policy is all part of the same thing. If you look at the overall trade imbalance, especially if you look at years when the Democrats either say, we're going to close down this pipeline, we're going to stop this drilling, we're going to close this coal mine, and not to mention, then when you say, we can get out of this hell if we just drill a few more wells, and they say, no, you can't drill. It'll take 10 years to bring online. They have no understanding whatsoever of markets. If you simply reduce the regulations and allow good, clean American companies to drill responsibly, mine responsibly, reopen coal-fired power stations, which already, thanks to EPA and other regulations, emit the least amount of pollution of any others on the planet, if you simply re-energize all of that, the markets will predict the falling prices of oil, gas, coal, and the electricity that's produced from them. And once you start producing and exporting, as we already can for liquid natural gas, unless Joe's Auto Pan signs a pause on it, then the world prices for those commodities will come down. So not only is money coming in and oil, gas, and coal going out, which helps to reverse the balance of payments and the balance of trade, but also Iran, Putin, China, and all the others are now suffering because the energy they hoped to sell is bringing them less bucks.
Yes,
And
less
that's
of
the
it at a
beautiful
lower
thing.
price, too. It is a beautiful thing. And the president just released another executive order today telling everybody that they are to look for regulations that interfere with exactly what you were just talking about. Things that make it harder for businesses to get into a market, things that interfere from the government side with, free and fair competition, with getting things like pipelines done, all sorts of stuff. So this just keeps coming. He's like, you guys gotta go in, look at the law, look at the rules, figure out what's in the way, and let's talk about getting rid of it.
Right, and the nice thing is that since, and I've forgotten the name of the protagonist, since the court ruled last year that the Chevron deference no longer applies, all these agencies that made law out of whole cloth and enforced it themselves, even though they had no constitutional right to do so, are now finding and being told in no uncertain terms that all of their rulemaking and enforcement is invalid and will stop and be rescinded. And it's going to be wonderful. And the ATF's been told to tear up everything that was infringing on the lawful buying, selling, and use of guns and ammunition. And the EPA and other regulations that were being applied. Do you read today's shower heads?
I didn't. Yeah, no.
The low flow shower heads are
yes,
out.
yes, I did see that.
See that. You can now have a full flow shower, and as Trump says, it's a beautiful thing. I need that for my hair, or words to that effect. I forget exactly how he said it, but he made fun of having a shower for his hair.
Trump also released. There's also a press release from the White House called "Addressing Risks Associated with an Egregious Leaker and Disseminator of Falsehoods." So again, as we go into this, a lot of the fourth branch of government has been inclined to say things that aren't true or leak details that aren't supposed to be public yet. And they've already gone and grabbed some people. I know DHS grabbed some people that gave away information about ICE operations, and they plan to prosecute them, which is a good thing. And then I think there's a couple other examples, but there's actually an email out from the White House saying, so we're going to make an example of this guy because he leaked some false information and he leaked internal information and spun it in a false way. And even if you leak it in any way, if it's not supposed to be public yet, is that really your job? Especially when there's military or ICE or law enforcement involved and you put their lives at risk. I seem to remember Democrats spending an awful lot of time saying that you couldn't declassify stuff because you might put people in the intelligence community at risk. Well, this is the same thing. And they're actually stepping up and saying, look, if you're going to leak and you know it's wrong, we're going to prosecute you.
And that's wonderful.
It is. So we're going to wrap this up. Any closing thoughts on trade and tariffs before we hit the stop button?
Well, I did say in my last couple of comments to you online, on Signal, by the way, for which we don't have any uninvited guests because we're careful, that I think negotiating tariffs to zero would be a mistake, similar to granting China most favored nation status under Clinton. Low and even is how it should be, even with friends. In other words, don't make the charge nothing. You want there to be some uphill struggle to get products into our market, just not be huge, and vice versa.
Well, you should be looking at the best interests of your nation, yes.
It's the whole thing. It's the health and wealth of the nation, and it's manufacturing stuff. We won World War II because we could turn all those auto factories into Jeep and tank manufacturing plants. Well, try doing that today.
We'd have to borrow all the
We need
Japanese
that
plants.
stuff. Well, there's Japanese and German plants in the south of the USA because they're not unionized.
Right. And they also don't have to pay tariffs.
That's another story.
Anyway, we won't go there. Mike, thank you for making time to talk to me, and I will hopefully hear from you soon.
Yep, I think so, and as I hope that was useful. But I think Trump's on the right track here. I think that if we can get to a low and even tariffing, then we're going to have money coming into the Treasury, which is going to further reduce income taxes.
All right, we'll leave with that. Thank you, sir. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Grok Talk.